Hello and welcome to our Tipster preview of Redball Cricket. I'm going to share information on how best to use this service, how to get your bot set up, and a summary of everything that's happened so far results-wise as well. So as with any bot, the first thing that you need to do is accept the terms and conditions, then join the bot to start receiving tips. And then the next step depends on your own situation. If you've signed up through an affiliate or referral, you can click here. If you've done either of these, it's likely that you'll get free credits from the person that you're referred or affiliated with. And then after that, the next step always tends to be to sort out the groups that you're in. So on Rick's Cricket bot, there's no tips received by default. So any tips that you get are going to be the ones that you opt into through the groups. So to do this, you'll click /groups. Most of these are self-explanatory. If you have an account with William Hill or Paddy Power, you would join that group. And yeah, vice versa with all of these. For the softbooks group, that's just for any bets that might fall out of this domain. So if you have access to a lot of accounts, say like Betway, Sporting Index, Betfred, etc., you might want to join this as well for occasional bets. So the next thing to discuss is just some general details about Rick's service. Price wise, it's around £5 a credit. If you're someone that follows multiple bots though, you're likely to be paying £4 a point because there's a 5% additional discount for each additional bot you follow, up to a max of 5. So if you're actively following 5 bet bots, then your price is £4 a point. The average stake is probably 2 points, maybe 2.5 sometimes, but the staking range is varied. It can be 0.25 points for a man of the match bet at 15 odds. But the vast majority of bets will be in the kind of 1.8 to 2.0 price range. I would expect that if you're to be betting a minimum average stake, it should be around £10 a point really, so that as I've mentioned before, you don't really want to be paying more than 50% in subscription fees on the tips if you can help it. So £10 a point will, at the minimum, will make sure that you're above that ratio. In terms of the average monthly tips, it depends on what your options are and how many groups you're following. If you're following just Bet365, I'd say 85 would be the average monthly tips. If you're following all the groups now, with William Hill and Paddy Power, it's more likely to be maybe 120 to 130. That's been true for the last couple of months anyway, but I do think at this current point there's a lot of good cricket on. That figure obviously can vary depending on what the calendar is looking like at the time. In terms of the odds themselves, they're fairly price sensitive, but the one thing to mention with that is that Rick has a group chat for all the members, so if prices are slashed or whatever, then there's often advice that you can get for what you should be betting, whether the stakes should be different, or whether we can void a bet for you that you're not able to because the price has been cut, for example. The final thing to mention is Betfair Exchange friendliness, and I would say it's very similar to the darts in that there aren't going to be many Betfair Exchange bets. There just isn't the same depth of markets on the exchange, but maybe there's sort of around 5 to 10 bets per month, so it is a valid option if you want to follow there, just because Rick's a great tipster, so even if it's low volume, you only pay for the profit that you get. So it is an option, but obviously it's not the recommended way of following. The recommended way of following is through softbooks, where there are going to be a lot more volume. So let's talk about the results so far, which have been, simply incredible, particularly in the last 2 months, where you're looking at sort of over 160 points combined for those previous months, and the last 6 months have all been profitable. So it's a very high strike rate service in terms of total profit. In terms of the bets themselves, the strike rate must be kind of 55-60%. The ROI is very decent. It's around 15-16%, which, considering the odds are often between 1.8 to 2.0, is very high. It's very rare to get services with above a 10% ROI, considering the odds ranges that Rick's staking. In terms of the distribution of the bets, I would say around 60 to 70% of the bets are with Bet365, and that's reflected by the fact that close to 75% of the profit has come with that bookmaker. So it's highly recommended. To achieve the optimum results, you do need to have a Bet365 account, that's for sure. But equally, we are starting to see that Rick is profitable in almost every group that he tips in. So if we show all excluded groups, which sometimes will have bets where they're also in the Bet365 group, they're also in the William Hill and Paddy Power group, for example. And if you, for example, don't have a Bet365 account, but you have all the others, you would still be making 65 points profit with 231 points across all the bookmakers. So yeah, it's a great option if you just have any of these betting accounts, really. So the other thing you could say relating to this is, if you just have William Hill or Paddy Power, it also means that the volume of bets would be very manageable for you. One of the things about Rick's service is that it is very high volume at times. On an intensive day, you might have 25 bets, for example, if you followed all the groups. Whereas if you followed just William Hill or Paddy Power, you might get an average of 2-3 bets on an average day, for example. So that is one way of being able to manage volume, is just selecting certain groups that you follow. Another way to manage volume is you can turn tips on and off at certain times of the day. If, for example, you know you're going to be away for 3 hours, then you can turn the tips off. If you get a message from Rick on the bot to say there's 10 tips coming and you don't want to be betting that many in one go, you can also do exactly the same. Another relevant option is setting up active times. So say you only want to receive tips in the morning, you could set it up so that you get tips between 9 o'clock and 13 o'clock, for example. And that's another way that you could determine the bet so that the volume is manageable to your liking. So it's a high volume service, and it's quite an intensive service if you're following all the bets and all the groups. But I also want to show there's ways that you can, if you are someone that prefers a lower maintenance approach, there are ways that you can set things up so that it is easier to follow and that it's not as overwhelming. In conclusion, it's absolutely fantastic service that Rick runs, with an incredible 215 points profit in the last 6 months and an average of 80 points. I can't believe I'm saying that, but yeah, an average of 80 points profit for the last 2 months on the bet bots. So it's a stunning service in that respect. A great one for members to really turn over volume and not have to follow many tipsters. Generally, if you're following just Rick's service, that would be, almost a portfolio in itself at times. So it is a great option for anyone. Some of the bets can be sensitive to maybe accounts closed, so it does help to have an access to a steady stream of Bet365 accounts in a way that you're able to do that if possible, because it's inevitable with the higher volume and with how much profit Rick makes in a short space of time, that they're not always going to be the most secure in keeping account longevity, but the trade-off is that you can make excellent profits in the short term. The final thing to note is Rick's a top guy in himself and is very helpful with the community and being very informative about when tips are likely to happen, when the volume is going to be high. So all of that kind of lends itself to being a great service, and I'm sure if you needed recommendations from members, then feel free to drop me a message and you'll get some glowing reviews as to Rick's service. So cheers guys, and good luck if you end up following.